and it ended up being one of the most enjoyable relationships.
I saw her on a TV show, and I had never seen her before, and I said, that's it. Whoever she is, I'm going to go with it. I'm going to take a
There are movie stars, and then there are legends. Robert Redford became known as more than a Hollywood favorite. To many, he was the kind of man people quietly admired, a figure whose presence seemed effortless and timeless. Yet behind that familiar smile and the easy charm of the Sundance Kid lived someone shaped by deep and complicated feelings, affection found, affection lost, and memories he carried through the years. Now, at 89, Redford has spoken about the 6 women who helped form the person he became, the first partner who believed in him long before recognition arrived, the celebrated artist whose presence faded too soon, the spirited connection he struggled to contain, the close companion who nearly became something greater, and the one woman who finally brought a sense of calm to his wandering heart. These are not loud stories or fleeting rumors. They are the quieter truths behind a man the world thought it fully understood, because Robert Redford's most meaningful chapters were never written on a screen. Number 1. Lola Van Veen, the early love who remained in his memory. Long before the awards, the covers, and the familiar name, there was Lola Van Veen. She was not part of Hollywood's lights. She was a historian, thoughtful, steady, and living far from the industry's attention. She was someone steady, someone genuine, someone who knew him simply as Bob. They married in 1958, at a time when Redford was still a young man reaching toward uncertain possibilities. The world had not yet noticed him, but Lola had. She believed in him long before anyone else cared to look. Together they built a home, raised 4 children, and tried to hold on to a sense of ordinary life, even as recognition drew nearer each day. But the very success Redford dedicated himself to eventually placed strain on the life they had created. The long stretches away, the constant travel, the weight of expectations, all of it created a distance that neither of them had intended. Quietly, over the years, those small gaps became harder to mend. In 1985, after nearly 30 years together, they chose to part. There were no public disputes, no loud stories, only 2 people acknowledging that affection can change in ways no one can fully guide. Yet even after their paths separated, Lola remained present in his memories. In later reflections, Redford spoke of her with a gentle respect, and at times with that soft, lingering sadness that appears when recalling someone who still carries meaning. It was clear that Lola was more than his first partner. She had been the grounding force during years when life moved quickly around him, and anchors, even when released, leave a quiet and lasting mark on the heart. Number 2. Natalie Wood, a connection that glowed softly within the golden atmosphere of 1960s Hollywood. This was a time when studios shaped every story, and photographers followed the stars with constant attention. In the middle of that bright, restless world, Redford crossed paths with a woman whose presence felt almost unreal. Natalie Wood had already become part of Hollywood's history. She had grown up before the lens, moving from a gifted young performer into one of the most admired figures of her era. For Redford, still finding his way, she was both a colleague and an enigma, someone whose depth drew interest even when her thoughts remained unspoken. They collaborated on several films, most notably Inside Daisy Clover in 1965, and This Property is Condemned in 1966. On screen, their connection carried a natural warmth that invited audiences to wonder whether something sincere might have shaped it. Perhaps in its own quiet way, it did. Redford portrayed the distant wanderer, cool and slightly removed, while Natalie appeared as the hopeful dreamer, reaching for something honest. Together, they reflected the restless spirit of a generation searching for meaning. Away from the set, quiet conversations began to circulate, soft suggestions that there might have been more between them, something they preferred to keep within their own private space. For Natalie, who had grown up beneath Hollywood's unrelenting lights, Redford felt like a quiet escape. He did not seek attention, nor did he chase the spotlight. He carried himself with a calm restraint that stood in contrast to the world around them. And to Redford, Natalie was far more than a familiar face on set. She was a mystery, glowing with talent while carrying a depth that few truly understood. Friends later recalled that Redford cared for her in a thoughtful, steady way. He sensed the weight she carried, the expectations, the pressure, and the quiet loneliness that can follow a life lived in full view. Perhaps he recognized some of those feelings because he was beginning to experience them as well. Whatever formed between them, whether a gentle affection or an unspoken understanding, remained with him through the years. When Natalie's life came to an early and unexpected end in 1981, it affected Redford deeply. It reminded him how even the brightest presences in Hollywood could be delicate. He seldom spoke about her, but when he did, his voice grew softer, as though he were protecting a cherished memory. There was care in the way he described her, a respectful sadness, a sense that speaking too much might diminish something held close. Natalie Wood may not have been the lasting partner in his life, but she was a moment that left a quiet impression. Something genuine within a world often shaped by illusion, brief, yet meaningful. Number 3. Barbra Streisand, a meeting of contrasts. If Natalie was a spark, Barbra carried the energy of a rising flame. When Redford and Streisand came together for The Way We Were in 1973, both were already admired figures, but neither could have predicted the impact their collaboration would create. Their on-screen connection drew immediate attention, creating a story that felt larger than the film itself. It was more than a romance. It was a quiet struggle between passion and reserve, between ideals and feelings, between two people moving through life with very different rhythms. Barbra, with her bold energy and unshakable determination, approached every moment with her whole heart. She carried emotion in her eyes, in her voice, in every expression she brought to the screen. Redford moved in a different way. Steady, composed, almost serene, he played his character as someone containing a world of unspoken thoughts, and that gentle tension made each shared scene resonate even more. Away from the cameras, their connection carried a similar complexity. Years later, Streisand openly shared her admiration for him, once describing him as the golden boy. For her, he represented something rare in the industry: grace, talent, and a quiet strength. Redford, always private, maintained boundaries that were part of who he was. He admired her deeply, respected her craft, yet her intensity, her desire to explore every emotional layer, could at times feel overwhelming. He tended to guard his feelings carefully, while Barbra embraced hers with openness. It became a delicate balance, one drawn by affection on one side and measured distance on the other. And perhaps that contrast is what made their film endure. It felt sincere. Audiences sensed it, that blend of longing and restraint, shaped not just by performance, but by something quietly real between them. The ending of The Way We Were, where affection gently slips apart under the weight of time, echoed the quiet distance forming between them away from the camera. Barbara once suggested that Redford might have been the one who drifted from her life, and perhaps there was a truth in that, because for Redford, even if she was not a lasting partner, the admiration he held for Streisand remained, a presence that stayed within the larger story of his journey. If Mike once suggested that Redford might have been the one who drifted from her life, and perhaps there was a truth in that, because for Redford, even if she was not a lasting partner, the admiration he held for Streisand remained, a presence that stayed within the larger story of his journey. If Mike once suggested that Redford might have been the one who drifted from her life, and perhaps there was a truth in that, because for Redford, even if she was not a lasting partner, the admiration he held for Streisand remained, a presence that stayed within the larger story of his journey.
Number 4. Sonia Braga, a connection marked with intensity that nearly overtook him. By the late 1980s, Robert Redford was no longer simply a familiar face. He had become a force in the industry, shaping stories not only as an actor, but as a director and producer, building entire worlds on screen. Then came Sonia Braga, the Brazilian actress whose vitality seemed to illuminate every room she entered. She was not only admired for her appearance, but for her boldness, her spirit, and the fearless honesty she brought to her roles in Donna Floor and Her Two Husbands and Kiss of the Spider-Woman. Braga radiated emotion with a kind of natural brilliance. She lived with an open heart, guided by instinct and passion. For Redford, who had spent much of his life keeping his feelings measured and contained, she was an unexpected surge of energy, a presence impossible to overlook. Their connection reached far beyond simple chemistry. It carried cultural depth, emotional contrast, even a quiet sense of spiritual difference. She brought the warmth and rhythm of Latin America. He brought the reflective calm of the American West. She embraced life fully, never holding back, and that mixture of freedom and intensity both intrigued and unsettled him. Those close to Redford at the time described their bond as powerful, something that drew them in deeply and tested their balance. Lola Van Veen had steadied him. Barbara Streisand had challenged him, but Sonia Braga swept him into a world of feeling he had never fully allowed himself to enter. For the first time, Redford was not standing calmly within the storm, he was part of it. Yet passion that intense rarely settles for long. It glows brightly, then gently fades. Redford longed for balance, for quiet, for a life shaped by steadiness. Braga, by contrast, thrived on emotion, movement, and the beauty of unpredictability. Their worlds met in a way that was striking, yet harmony proved difficult. Their time together did not last, but its imprint remained. Years later, Redford spoke of her with unmistakable admiration, describing her as a force of nature. That sentiment revealed everything. She was not the person with whom he built a home, but she was the flame he could never quite forget. A reminder that even the most composed individuals can be carried away by feeling. Number 5. Sybil Sagers, the woman who eventually brought quiet to his heart. By the time Redford met her, he had already traveled through many chapters. He had been Hollywood's admired figure, the filmmaker who reshaped expectations, the advocate who used his voice thoughtfully. He had known recognition, solitude, and the stillness that follows when attention moves elsewhere. And then, at a moment when few anticipated new beginnings, affection returned to him. Sybil was not an actress, nor part of the Hollywood world. She was an artist, a painter born in Germany, whose work reflected the colors of nature, the very landscape that had always helped keep Redford connected to himself. They met in the 1990s, during a period when Redford had stepped back from the center of attention, choosing the quiet of Sundance, Utah. Sybil's calm spirit and creative strength matched that environment seamlessly. She did not seek recognition or headlines. She found meaning in stillness, in nature, in moments untouched by noise. Their connection did not grow under bright lights or at crowded events. It took root in peaceful places, in the mountains, among the trees, in the quiet spaces where they could simply exist without expectation. After many years together, they chose to formalize their bond in 2009, in a private ceremony in Hamburg, Germany. There were no cameras, no media attention, only a simple commitment shared between two people. Sybil became more than his partner. She became his sense of calm, the steady presence after decades of movement and change. For Redford, she represented something rare, a quiet balance that arrived at a time when he had already lived through so much. She was the person who could sit with him in silence and make that silence feel warm, meaningful. After years shaped by passion, uncertainty, and the shifting world of fame, she offered him something he had long searched for, perhaps without even realizing it: stillness. Now at 89, as Redford reflects on the path behind him, it is clear that Sybil is not simply another part of the story. She is the chapter that closes it with grace. If passion once set his life alight, she provided the gentle calm that followed. And sometimes, quiet, enduring peace becomes the truest form of love.
Number 6. Jane Fonda. The bond that stayed just beyond the edge of romance. Few partnerships in Hollywood ever felt as natural as Robert Redford and Jane Fonda. From the moment they appeared together in Barefoot in the Park in 1967, audiences were immediately drawn in. Their chemistry felt easy and light, creating the sense that they were connected in ways that stretched beyond the screen. Years later, when they reunited for The Electric Horseman in 1979, and again for Our Souls at Night in 2017, that same warmth returned. Older, more reflective, yet still unmistakable. Watching them together carried a timeless quality, as if no distance had formed between those moments. Yet behind that closeness, something quietly intriguing remained. They were never romantic partners. What they shared was not love in the traditional sense, but a bond that rested gently beside it. A connection that approached deeper feeling without ever crossing into it. Redford admired Jane's spirit, her determination, and her willingness to speak boldly in a world that often preferred silence. She carried a courage that he respected. Jane, for her part, never concealed her fondness for him. She once reflected that a different path might have brought them closer, but life is shaped by timing, and theirs never quite aligned. Redford remained protective of his private world, thoughtful and contained, while Fonda lived with confidence and openness beneath the public eye. Perhaps Redford sensed that stepping beyond friendship might endanger the trust they had built. Or perhaps he simply understood that some connections are too delicate to test. And yet, when they reunited late in life for Our Souls at Night, it felt as though time had gently brought them back to where they were always meant to meet. They played two neighbors rediscovering companionship in their later years, but for audiences, it felt like witnessing a quiet truth, a glimpse into a path they never took, but one that seemed entirely possible. It was as if the story on screen allowed the world to imagine what might have been, a gentle affection that lived just beyond the boundary of their real lives. Jane Fonda was not a love lost, but rather a reminder of one, proof that not every meaningful connection is meant to be lived openly. Some remain in the heart, soft and enduring. The loves that shaped a legend. Robert Redford's life appeared golden to the world, filled with success, beauty, and recognition. But behind that image was someone shaped by tenderness, by joy, and by the quieter aches that accompany a long life. From Lola Van Veen, the woman who gave him a home and family, to Natalie Wood, whose gentle complexity stayed with him. From Barbra Streisand, whose fire challenged him, to Sonia Braga, whose intensity nearly swept him away. From Sybil Sagers, who brought him lasting peace, to Jane Fonda, the companion who might have become something more. Each woman left an imprint. Each became part of his story. At 89, Redford's true legacy extends beyond the films. It lives in the affections, the lessons, and the remarkable women who helped shape the man behind the familiar face. He was never chasing stardom. He was searching for meaning. Applause did not guide him. Purpose did. Every success, every moment of heartache, every connection shaped him into someone who valued quiet far more than attention. People often saw the legend, the Sundance Kid, the familiar Hollywood figure. Yet behind closed doors, Redford remained reserved, thoughtful, and softly guarded. Fame did not energize him. It weighed on him. He once remarked that the higher a person climbs, the more isolated the air becomes, and he lived with that understanding. Red carpets and flashing lights were never his true surroundings. His world lived in nature, in family, and in the craft of storytelling that carried genuine meaning. By the 1990s, Redford had shifted from admired actor to mentor, becoming the person who opened doors for new dreamers. He founded the Sundance Institute, a place where creative voices outside the traditional system could finally be heard. He was not only shaping films, he was shaping a movement. Independent artists, young directors, storytellers with determination, many found their path because he believed in them. Yet even as he built that legacy, the quiet weight of earlier years never fully left him. Friends remember how often he reflected on the people who shaped him, not only the women who cared for him, but the private moments of joy and sorrow that left their marks across a lifetime. He carried those memories gently, the way only someone who has lived deeply can. And the truth is, Robert Redford never believed stories truly end. He felt they continue long after the lights dim and the screen fades to black. His own journey lives on in the films he shaped, in Sundance, and in the countless artists who found the courage to create something real. Even now, at 89, when that familiar smile returns, you can still see the dreamer, the partner, the loyal friend, and the quiet soul who never stepped away from what mattered. Time may soften the applause, but a true legacy endures. Redford was never reaching to be larger than life. He was simply trying to live it with honesty, steadiness, and quiet courage. And perhaps that is why his story still glows long after the final frame. If a moment in his journey stayed with you, feel free to share your thoughts, offer a gentle like, and subscribe for more stories told beyond the spotlight. See you in the next story.